Hi everyone, I'm Ashlee. I don't have a full slideshow today, but I thought this was kind of a cute graphic. I like the little please note the calm exterior. So just shy of a year ago, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, so it wasn't long before my 30th birthday. Type 1 is an autoimmune disease that is generally hereditary. In fact, our family is lucky enough to be susceptible to a group of autoimmune diseases that includes thyroid, celiac, and type 1 diabetes. So there was always a chance I was going to end up with something. The difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes is kind of confusing, so hopefully this breaks it down for those who aren't sure. The way I generally explain it in layman's terms is that type 1 is an autoimmune condition whereby your immune system destroys the cells in your pancreas, which produce insulin. Insulin converts sugar in the body to glucose, which feeds your cells and your brain. So without insulin, things become pretty serious and you starve your body of energy. Type 1 is not reversible through diet and exercise. It is for life. In fact, my pancreas at the moment is still making a tiny bit of insulin, but will eventually stop altogether. Type 1 affects around 15% of all diabetics. Type 2 diabetes has the same outcome where the pancreas stops producing insulin, but in many cases this can be reversible through making some lifestyle changes as it's more of an insulin production blockage. Not as many type 2s are dependent on insulin injections, but all type 1s eventually need to inject insulin. We basically have to do manually what everybody else's bodies do naturally. This takes extremely close management, it is very serious, and having high blood sugar over a long period of time can have some very terrible effects. So at the end of last year, I started suffering from extreme exhaustion to the point where I'd wake up in the morning and not know how on earth I was going to make it through the day. My symptoms were pretty generic and very common in people with the onset of type 1 diabetes. Leg cramps in the middle of the night, weight loss, drinking litres of water a day with an unquenchable thirst, urinating a lot, and my eyes became so unbelievably sore and sensitive I could barely even watch TV. I also got glasses for the first time in my life, and I would be in bed asleep by 8 p.m. every night. I couldn't even keep up with the circuits at the gym, which I'd been doing for years. My period even stopped because my body was under so much stress. In hindsight, I had all the symptoms that pointed to diabetes, but even when I went to the doctor, I went because I was tired and I wanted some blood tests. My mum actually encouraged me to get a blood test eventually, as she said I'd lost the sparkle in my eyes, and I actually noticed I had massive black circles under my eyes that I thought would never go away. So I went and got my fasted blood test one morning before work, and the blood glucose test results came back that very same day. The doctor called me at work at 1 p.m. telling me they needed to see me that afternoon, and they'd already booked me an appointment at 2:30. So I sat there for an hour and a half at work freaking out because I had no idea why they needed to see me so urgently. My blood glucose level during that fasted blood test came back at around 18. The normal range is between 5 and 6. I cried. It was so overwhelming to be told I had a chronic illness that would need close management for the rest of my life. Although my pop was and my uncle is type 1, I realised I never knew too much about it and just accepted that they seemed to need injections of insulin before every one of their meals. The scariest thing getting started on insulin was the needle. I remember seeing my pop's needle growing up, and it was a huge metal needle. When eventually I was shown the needle I would be using, it was a huge relief, being just 4mm and so fine. The needles today are disposable, so thankfully they're always nice and sharp and hygienic. Things have changed, and today being a diabetic means you have so much more of a personal control over your diabetes. It's really important for me to talk about the mental effects of diabetes and how it can have a stigma attached to it. There are statistics out there that show 24% of adults with type 1 diabetes have moderate to severe depression and distress. Diabetes-related stigma was also prevalent within this study, among respondents who said they had either experienced or been perceived as judged, weak, or treated unfairly. The majority of type 1 diabetics are diagnosed as children or teens, and although I was lucky enough to avoid this experience, many can become resentful when they're trying to fit into a peer group. The causes of living with high blood sugar long term are very scary. It can destroy your eyesight, cause limbs to be amputated as it affects your nerves, and cause major problems in your kidneys. It damages the large blood vessels of the heart, brain, and legs. I also have high cholesterol from diabetes, which I never would have thought. So although I look and act like everybody else, if I don't manage my blood sugars well and keep them within a safe range, there could be major consequences. That said, studies have shown with good management of diabetes, we can live just as full and happy, healthy lives as others. The things that cause high blood sugar are astounding because it's literally everything. How much sleep you've had, food, caffeine, alcohol, stress levels, for women their menstrual cycles, how much you've eaten that day, exercise, even a cold. I also just wanted to talk a little bit about what I was like before I was diagnosed. I've literally gone to the gym 5 days a week for 10 years. I would say I've had a very balanced diet full of natural, unprocessed and colourful foods. It didn't make a difference to what I was eventually going to get genetically. Other people in the family have thyroid conditions and celiac disease. I've been tested for this and due to my genetic makeup will eventually have thyroid issues too. But I figure if I can inject insulin multiple times a day, I can definitely deal with a daily thyroid tablet. It's so funny because when people see me with my needle, I'll often hear, how can you do that? I would never be able to inject myself. And my response is, well, if it was between this and not living, you probably would be able to. I also have to test my blood sugar by pricking my finger multiple times a day. I'm not going to lie, diabetes isn't a breeze and I fail at it every single day. But have I changed for the better in the past 12 months because of it? I think I have. I've adopted ways of thinking and behaving, organising and streamlining to make a difficult thing in life so much easier, as I believe keeping my mental, emotional, physical and spiritual health in check is the most important thing I could do for my condition. For example, I know during the week I can control what I eat as I'm in a routine with a full-time job. I take healthy snacks and lunch to work each day, which means I don't go searching for sugary snacks between meals, and I don't have to create another thing to think about. I also have a much more organised, minimalistic approach to the way I live. I buy less, so I've got more time to concentrate on the things that are really important. It's like the successful people of the world, such as Obama and Steve Jobs, that only ever wore one outfit doing the top jobs. They could think about everything else of a higher level than choosing something out of their wardrobe each morning. I haven't taken things this far. But I have made space for myself by not booking in exhausting back-to-back social activities and automating all of my finances so I don't have to think about money or worry on a daily basis. I've continued exercising every day as this lowers my stress levels so I don't have to, and helps me continue a positive outlook on life. Honestly, managing diabetes could be a full-time job, and when you already have a really busy full-time job, you need to put measures in place to stay organised and on top of it. Being a positive person naturally helps too. Whenever a bad thought comes into my head, I've trained myself over a long period of time to immediately switch it off and focus on the positive. And then there are the million different ways of eating out there. The most realistic approach I've found is based more on paleo or low carb, as carbs are essentially sugar, so that's something else I've learnt on my journey too. I feel this way I can enjoy the majority of foods I love. However, low carb to me definitely doesn't mean no carb, and I would never deprive myself of something if I wanted it. I feel like this would be detrimental and definitely cause more issues long-term psychologically. I love food and controlling portions for me is hard. I need to get my head around so many new things as overeating is not cool for a diabetic. It wasn't long into my diagnosis that I started looking around for people my age on social media to connect with. I started my own little Instagram account, which is basically just posts of food, but it's a forum I can ask questions and also share my knowledge. So many people have connected with me, and there are a huge number of inspiring pages I have linked to. In real life too, people have reached out to me, and this has been an incredible blessing. My gym has been a wonderful support, and I love knowing my trainers are all aware of my condition. My workplace is supportive and aware of when I need to inject and eat. I feel grateful I share this disease with so many others and I don't feel alone, and that it's also heavily funded, which makes medication much more affordable. I know this is not a luxury many others with rarer conditions have. The future for me, well, things are going to get harder. If I want to have a baby, for example, I need to go and speak to someone about how I will manage pregnancy with type 1, as there are now risks with everything I do. One day I may have kids and they may be diabetics, and then things could get really tough. I will most likely eventually have to get an insulin pump, which freaked me out at first, but now doesn't scare me so much anymore. I guess the ego disappears when you realise there is so much more to life than looking good in a bikini without a pump attached to your body. There's research happening all the time to try and find a cure. In Australia alone, there are currently 118,000 people with type 1 diabetes registered to the National Diabetes Scheme. I have never not felt grateful throughout this journey. Diabetes is just something that's been presented to me. I'm not alone, and from the moment I was diagnosed, I promised myself I would do the very best I can. I see an endocrinologist, which is a hormone doctor, every few months to keep me on track and ensure I'm staying accountable. I'm also not afraid to embrace being different, stay open about my diabetes and continue the conversation to tackle this challenge life has thrown at me. Thank you.